Hello, everybody. It's Susan. I'm here to talk a little bit about the Virgo total lunar eclipse that we're going to have on the 14th of March. Universal time, it will be 6:54:36 a.m. So you can adjust for your time. And that will be, uh, for most of North America, it'll be on the 14th, but while you're perhaps sleeping. And then if you're in the Pacific, or perhaps even central, it'll be the evening of the 13th. But most of the world will experience this on the 14th of March. And I want to just point out that this is also part of a cycle of eclipses. There's always pairs of eclipses, sometimes even three in a row, depending on the year. And in this case, we've got another eclipse coming up on the 29th of March. So I'll talk about that one. I've already talked about these degree points to a certain extent, because as we have this Virgo lunar eclipse, the ruler of the eclipse, which is Mercury, is actually at the degree point of the 29th of March eclipse, which will happen at 9 degrees of Aries, pretty exactly. This is just a half a degree off. And Venus stationed retrograde just on the 1st of March at 10 degrees 50 minutes of Aries, so very close to that sensitive point. And then the eclipse itself will be at exactly 9 degrees. So we're getting a lot of activity at that point in Aries, and it would be really helpful for you to check in your chart what is happening around that 9-degree point. And you can give or take 2 or 3 degrees on either side of that. And then by square and opposition, you can look for the cardinal signs. So the cardinal signs are Aries and Cancer and Libra and Capricorn. And those will be really powerfully impacted. So look at those points. And I will do a sign by sign. I'm trying not to make this video too long. I will come back and talk about these eclipses again closer to the moment of the eclipse, because there's just a lot to talk about. In terms of our times, we're living in extraordinary times, and this is something I want to keep looking at, and perhaps with the support also of other astrologers. So we'll see as we go through the next sort of 10 days, because it's just about 11 days from now that this eclipse will take place, as I'm recording this on the 3rd of March. So the eclipse itself, the point of the eclipse is what is in Virgo at 23 degrees 56 minutes of Virgo, which is essentially 24 degrees. And again, you can round up or down, so plus or minus 2 degrees, maybe 3 degrees. And especially because this is so close to the nodal axis at 27 degrees, you could go from basically, let's say, 21 or 22 degrees of Virgo all the way through till the end of Virgo. So it's a pretty extraordinary impact. This moment in time is going to be quite transformational. Think back also to September of 2023, because actually on the 15th of September, the new moon in Virgo is what is being reflected now at the full moon in Virgo, because this is a lunar eclipse. Therefore, it means it's a full moon. That's an opposition between the sun and the moon. And this one is happening on the south node. So what was going on for you on the 15th of September? And that degree point was 2158. So it's 2 degrees away from where this one is happening. So it'll be quite impactful to the same people in the same kind of zone. And that 15 September 2023 new moon started this cycle. And this is like a lunar family. This is the full moon of that lunar family. And then that continues as the full moon phase wanes for another year and a half. And that takes us then to the new moon of September 11th of 2026. So you could go from September 2023 to September 26 and say, this is a whole story, a lunar story around this Virgo area of your life. And so what you're looking at now is something that began around that mid-September 2023 point. And what you're now letting go of, this is a south node eclipse. And when the south node is on the moon, we're really having to release something. And the moon represents things that are connecting us to our emotional self. It's also representing the mind and the way that we remember, or the way that we operate from the mind and our emotional nature. It's we could say it's the heart's desire, where Venus is actually our relational energy, and our desire nature in terms of the things that we like or that we prefer, the things we're attracted to. The moon is our emotional nature. So don't put Venus in the same basket with the emotional nature. It's not the same as the lunar relationship to emotions, which are based on memories, based on things that are often unconscious as well. So we're shedding a lot of that, but the moon also represents females in general, or female nurturing figures, or the older female in our life. And it can also represent home and what home feels like. And I'll see as we go through the sign by sign readings, we'll see how that's showing up in your life, and we'll look at that more in detail. But also, I want to point out that at that phase of the new moon that we're going to get in September 2026, Mars is going to be just 1 degree away from where it is now. So Mars will be at 19 and some almost 20 degrees of Cancer. It's not in its retrograde phase as it is now. Thankfully, it's just now a Mars transit, a normal Mars going through the sign of Cancer. So Cancer, so you can breathe a sigh of relief, but it will recall very strongly this lunar eclipse. So September 2026 is going to pick up on the energy of this lunar eclipse very powerfully. And then Pluto, which is stationing soon enough, and in a couple of weeks after this eclipse, stationing retrograde, is Pluto will be at this 3.5 degree point, roughly, but in retrograde at that time, again in September of 2026. So there's going to be something that's happening now that you're going to get a response to in September of 2026. So this is a really long cycle. It always is with the lunar eclipse phases. It's good to look a year and a half back and a year and a half forward and see what were those phases of the moon that were being called in. Now, all of the energy that's really tightly connecting to the nodal axis is also pulling us into the Pisces energy. And that Pisces energy is strongly influenced currently by Neptune on the North Node and by Saturn, which is on the Sun. It's just less than 2 degrees, maybe just a bit more than 1.5 degrees away from the Sun in opposition to that moon. So there's something quite serious. And it's also whatever is going on now, whatever we're releasing collectively as well as individually, is going to have an impact for the long run. That's the indicator of Saturn. It's about where we're re-establishing something that has deeper meaning, that has a kind of a gravitas to it. So whatever this is in your life, in terms of the Pisces energy, you can again give it 2 or 3 degrees on either side. But let's say from 20 degrees of Pisces all the way through till the end of Pisces and into the beginning of what we call the Aries point, the first degree of Aries, the 0 to 1 degree point of Aries, it's very significant right now. So if you have planets in that last decan of Pisces, the last 10 degrees of Pisces, or the last 10 degrees of Virgo, and then by square, also think of Gemini and Sagittarius, because that will create a tension that requires some kind of adjustment or some kind of change in those areas of your life. You pay attention to that as well, because this will be a significant moment of change for you. So I want to just really touch briefly on the significance of the energies, or say my interpretation of these energies, which have a lot to do with our relationship to what we are perhaps worried about or anxious about, or the worry that we might hold from our history, from our past, fears that might be now coming up to the surface, that also require a reassessment and a release. Virgo relates often to these preferences, or to a sense of what is the correct way to do things, or this notion of things can be perfect or perfected. And that creates a lot of internal anxiety and sometimes external behavior that's related to that can border on neurotic behavior, because we're trying to control the outer world in that energy, as opposed to trying to understand our inner experience and why we might feel this sense of ungrounding or anxiety. And then whenever you feel anxiety, it blocks the flow, it blocks energy, it blocks chi or prana, it doesn't support our flow. And so we want to get back to this more Piscean way of being in the flow, particularly now, and we're going to have a lot of this energy for a year and a half to come. So it's what we're going to have to learn to grapple with. And especially if that's not your way, typically, if you do have this tendency to want to hold on to things, or that you anticipate too much, you go too far forward into the future. And for some of you to hear that this relates to a year and a half from now might actually stress you out, but others will just say, oh, that's interesting. I'll keep that in mind because I see that I'm in a bigger dynamic of change. If you're one of the people who get stressed by hearing that this energy is starting a program or starting a cycle for a year and a half, well, it always does, except that now you're informed about that. So what you do with that information is really about your internal operating system in terms of how you feel. That's your moon, the lunar experience is how we feel about that, how we reflect on that, how we relate to that emotionally. And this is a great time with the South Node on the moon to reflect on how that blocks us and how it makes us feel uncomfortable or anxious in a way that actually prevents us from operating outwardly. So if you're feeling discouragement, if you're feeling anxious right now, this is a time to really change your perspective. Take yourself in your two hands and say, I need to change the way I relate to things so that I can relate better to what life as it's happening right now, rather than catastrophizing or rather than going into how can I micromanage the world around me. One of the ways that you can do that is by subtracting yourself from a lot of the worldly stuff that's coming up. I still get people requiring or requesting rather the mundane analysis that I used to do. And I'm really trying to avoid that. And I will do a little bit of that as we go, especially into the Neptune-Saturn cycle. And so that will be part of something that I'll put out here now in the month of March, because there are some really interesting bigger cycles that are happening. And I didn't include Aries in this chart, but Aries is about to be conjoined with Chiron, which is an era-defining thing that has a lot to do with our era of colonialization and how the Western world is now in a free fall, moving away from that pattern. But I don't want to go there in all of my videos because I find that, again, it keeps pulling us into this circus of what is going on around us that is actually unreal. It's not real. It causes a lot of mental agitation and a lot of gossip and stuff going on that is detracting from what we're able to deal with. And the more that we try and reach out into all of that, the more we become anxious and struggle with just being here and now. This is really the elevated way of dealing with yourself in this time, is to really grab control of the mind. This is, somebody made a comment in my recent video that in trying to talk about the Venus retrograde, that because I had a Venus in Aquarius, it was too intellectual an approach to what this person described as an emotional thing. And again, Venus is not about emotions. She's about our desires and preferences, which will be contingent on our emotions, but she doesn't herself represent emotions. But nonetheless, you can't grapple with your emotional nature without stepping back from it. So if you're trying to deal with your emotional nature from an emotional place, you're just going to create more of the same. You're going to get yourself completely mixed up. So you need a certain separation, a stepping back to be able to see, oh, those are emotions. They're coming and going. Those are like thoughts that are coming and going in waves. And you need to have that perspective because the moon is very subjective and that emotionality is very subjective. How do I feel about all this? It's not necessarily true in an objective way. So it's really helpful to grapple with that. Also because Mercury, the ruler of this lunation of this eclipse, is quite impulsive at this time and quite intense because it's also slowing down to retrograde the day after this eclipse. It'll be on the 15th of March, just within a 24-hour period. So Mercury is basically at this same degree that it is at 9.5 degrees of Aries. And that's quite impulsive. It can be really flying off the handle, jumping to conclusions. Mercury and fire signs can do that, jumping to conclusions and thinking it already kind of knows. And that's a dangerous place to be if you're also feeling emotionally off center. So you need to recenter yourself emotionally by using this kind of perspective, which you can only get from a Mercury that is calm. So it's worth knowing that I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my emotions. I'm observing all of that. The self that I am is the observer of all of that. Whether you were 2 years old and you're in the observation of life, or whether you're in a 50-year-old body or whatever age you are now, and you're observing all of that, it's the same self that is doing the observing, and all of the rest is fluctuating constantly. So you think of yourself as this clear blue sky of awareness, and everything is happening in that awareness. And the emotions and the upset, it's coming and going. And just remember back, if you're older now and you look back to yourself as a teenager, how emotional you could be as a teenager about things that now you would look at and think that's so irrelevant. It doesn't disturb me at all, because the emotionality of the adolescent brain, say up to 24, 25 years old, is very intense. There's a strong life force that also contributes to a strong reactivity. And of course, that's going to have some exceptions amongst the youth of whatever era, but it's worth remembering that that's not who you are, however old you are. These are things that you can look at. If you can see it, then it's the subject. And it's the object looking at the subject. And that means it's not who you are. So keep this in mind. If you're somebody who's feeling life is stressful and chaotic and really disconcerting right now, then you're plugging in too much to what's going on around you and trying to fixate on what to do about that, rather than coming inwards and having a sense of, how do I work with my feelings? How can I come back to a calm place? Now, there's going to be a lot of insights and support, actually, although it can, if you're off center, it can be disruptive. That's a choice that you're making now, because you're choosing to believe your thoughts. You're choosing to engage with your emotionality. So remember, I can't choose the direction of chaos without getting more chaos on the outside. If I choose the emotionality, I get more emotional stress on the outside. So I must step back into myself and see and feel from the inside. How can I create a clear blue sky in me so that I can observe all the stuff that's happening outside with a more discerning frame of mind? And that's a good Virgo word as well, the discernment. This trine from Uranus can be deeply insightful. It's almost partile. I mean, it is partile, it's just out of degree. It's 6 arc minutes of a degree of trine. It's really, really strong. And Uranus is also trining the South Node as well. And that creates a sextile, of course, with both the Sun and Saturn, as well as the North Node in the Pisces zone. And so this is really intense opportunity, I'll call it, to change, to see yourself in a different way, to take in information that might be quite sudden, and especially based on whatever is going on in the Taurus zone of your chart, where we have now Uranus retracing its steps from last summer, 2024. It's coming back over that zone, and it's going to move into a whole new zone by May. But up until that point, we're retracing our steps from last summer. So again, there's something that you've already understood. It's not new. It's something you're dealing with that you are realizing now. Oh, right, that. I don't want more of that, or I want more of that, or that's what that meant to me. This is in the area perhaps of finances and our values and our relationships. It's all the Taurian aspects. Our possessions, what we do about that, and what do we feel is important to hold on to. I just had my birthday, and so I do an annual, not always on my birthday, it just happened that I did it on my birthday yesterday. I have an annual cleanup, and I try and do it around eclipse times. And those eclipses are great impulses for setting a stage of something new. So here we're looking to let go of things, letting go of whether it's emotional stuff or even things that we actually own. And it's really helpful symbolically to let go of material things and clear a space, let go and shed. So things that you really don't want anymore, or especially things that you're holding on to from a place of sentimentality, that can actually keep you quite bogged down. So try to think in terms of what can I give? What can I offer to someone who might need these things? And if they're trinkets and things that you're holding on to for sentimental reasons, try to make peace with whatever those emotions are. What is the neediness behind holding on to those things? Because there can be a kind of a hoarding energy, especially as we're looking at a lot of energy around sentimentality at this time. That Virgo Pisces axis can be a little bit sentimental and find it difficult to grapple, let's say, with what's going on in the world around. It can be this energy, and I'm going to say it again, of the victim martyr dynamic or the victim savior dynamic. And that can also be where we want to hold on to things in a way that it once felt comfortable, or we thought it was comfortable. We can keep a kind of a nostalgic way of looking at things, especially as we also have Mars in Cancer. And that nostalgia is really trying to harken back to an imagined past. It was not what it was, it's what we wish it was. And so notice, where am I holding on to all of these things? Even the notion of my country, my political party, my religion, whatever it is, holding on to these things from a romanticized place, that's very Piscean, where we're recognizing that it's actually never really been that way, if we really take a cold, hard, calculated look at it. And that's where we find the Aries energy can be really helpful, because we get this pioneering energy, we get this freshness of a vision, we get this energy that says, look, let's do this now in a different way, in a new way. It's fresh and new and dynamic. Now, of course, we have to balance that out with not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And so it could be a good time to begin to contemplate these things. And over the next couple of months, while Mercury and Venus are retrograding and back into Pisces and then coming forward through Aries once again, so Mercury on the 7th of April and Pisces on the 13th of April, then you'll probably be more clear, more sure of the things that you're ready to start and implement and move in this new direction based on what you're understanding already now in March. And also perhaps going back to September of 2024. No, 2023, a year and a half ago. And so try and have this sense of what was going on for you a year and a half ago, and how would you like to see things shifting? What do you need to let go of based on what was started in September of 2023, especially around the eclipse of the 15th, or the new moon? It wasn't an eclipse at that time. The eclipse happened in October then. That was still in the Aries and Libra dynamic. So many other things to say. I will call in again and tell you more about these different things that are coming up. And what I'd like to do now is talk more about the sign by sign, so we can look at that more specifically for you. I just want to see. Oh yeah, and the Aries, the conjunction between Venus and Mercury. So Venus retrograding and Mercury moving forward at around 8 degrees was on the 11th of March. So we're still dealing with this new sort of information, Mercury and Venus palling up. It's a great conjunction, a wonderful dynamic of new information that also ties into this potential for really new realizations, with Uranus here in trine to the moon and then trining the sun, calling in something new based on what we've understood since last summer, for the last year and a half, all these things that we've processed and understood. And really where Venus and Mercury are coming together on the 11th is going to help inform us. And then if we go back to the point of what's called the Venus star, when Venus retrogrades back to the 3rd degree, actually it'll be 2+ degrees of Aquarius, she's going to meet up with the sun at that point. So from the 2nd to the 3rd degree of Aries, did I say Aquarius? I meant Pisces. Sorry, I'm a little tired today. So that when the sun moves out of Pisces and into Aries, so in that 2nd, 3rd degree of Aries, he meets up with Venus, and that's the Venus star point. And this is a significant place to notice, because at that 2 degree 3-degree point of Aries, if you go back to your natal chart and even back over time and see what has been affected over time at this point, and how might it be affecting other things, you'll see that there's a lot of dynamism around that. Now, we'll see more about that when we look at the 29th of March. I'll come back to that story, but keep in mind that that process is also a sextile with Pluto. So there's something really deep that's changing here in this Venus cycle. And that includes Mercury. It's an uncanny cycle. So Venus is also, by the way, the exaltation ruler of Pisces. So we have the rulership of Mercury in ruling this lunar eclipse, and then we've got the exaltation ruler of the Sun and the North Node and everything else that's there in Pisces, which is Venus. So this is a really strong story of finishing up, ending something, letting go, that Piscean notion of merging with something, merging and moving into transformation phase. Is the notion of Shiva. There's the notion of especially in the form of Nataraja, the dancer of he's dancing the cosmos. So this is where Shiva is dancing out what has existed and dancing into existence what is yet to come. And that's this energy of Pisces. But this old and new thing is partly going to be assisted, we'll say, by your emotional attitudes, your thinking about it. What do I think is possible? What do I hold on to emotionally? What do I hold on that's creating anxiety? If you're feeling anxious about things, let it go and try to find things that you recognize. This makes me feel anxious. I have to move away from it. Is it too much information? Is it based on the news? Is it based on relationships or friendships that are not helpful or constructive? Where can you pull back a little bit so that there's more of you that can move forward as you go outwards in life? And this would be a brilliant time to really reflect on all those things. Not a great time for jumping into new things or taking action. It can be fine, obviously, if things are undergoing, if they're underway already, really no problem to carry on with them, even expanding them. But just notice things that start around this time, whether they be business or relational things, things that are important that you want to have lasting growth impact. It's not really a good time because we're in a phase of letting go, and it's good to try and understand what's going on as opposed to start something new. And then finally, just in terms of the eclipse visibility, if you're in North America, you'll see this as a total eclipse, and also part of South America. You'll still see it as a partial eclipse throughout South America, but the totality of it, I think, is only in the countries of like Peru and the countries on the west of South America. And then in Europe, same as the eastern part of South America, we're going to get pretty much a partial eclipse. We're not going to see the totality of it. So again, we're looking at a big story for the United States, Canada, same thing, Mexico, and Central America. There's going to be quite a big story around endings and something shifting in a very big way. And again, if that is something that makes you frightened, examine what is it that you're holding on to that is not resolved from other experiences. The moon is what we remember. It's our memory that can link us to childhood, that can link us to hope. And hope, when it's based on something that's going to happen on the outside that you're hoping for, like hoping for change, just like everybody threw all their hope into the Obama. I'm going to get a load of hate for this, but the Obama hopey, changey, feely kind of presence, and then realizing actually it was more of the same, empty promises and fraud of all of the other administrations, because there's no savior. There is nobody out there that can save you. You have to come inside and find that. So the hope and the optimism that you cultivate is based on resilience, and you can only get resilience from this place of being able to navigate and moving forward through difficulty, through challenges, and see what tools you already have at your disposal to navigate through change. There's no life on earth that doesn't face challenges. And so if you crumble in the face of challenges, you're not taking care of your own internal experience. You're waiting for somebody to come and save you. Go back to your parental experience, go back to whatever might have been damaged in your childhood and resolve that, and come to parent yourself and stop expecting outer people to save you. It keeps you weak. It keeps you in a place of anxiety, and therefore you're vulnerable to manipulation. And we know that we're definitely in a cycle of serious manipulation, and especially as we're coming into the AI era, where we can only come back to ourselves and trust ourselves, and we can't trust the external senses. So all of that to say, this is a really wonderful time if you open yourself up to the fluidity of change and to do that internal housekeeping, do the cleansing that's necessary to bring you to this point of being ready for a new era, because this is where we are. We're in a new era, and it's a massive new era. It's not just like a ho-hum new year or a new moon or whatever cycle. It's a really big new era. And we have to grapple with a lot of things that we've never done before. So finding that creative impulse is really, really important. Try not to go too deep into what you perceive to be your, if there's this kind of Pollyanna sense of my intuition is guiding me, but the things on the outside are not reflecting good choices, come back to yourself and analyze that. Look at your choices. Our intuition is one thing, but even our intuition requires a second glance. This notion, I used to teach mindfulness for many years, and one of the things I used to love as a statement was, don't trust every thought you have. Don't trust every thought you think, because your intuition is another form of a thought that also hopefully is coming from a feeling in the body. But even that needs to be stepped back from, and to see how much of this is hopeful, wishful thinking. And therefore I'm intuiting, but I'm thinking, actually, I'm trying to create this intuition so that it matches what I hope for, my desire nature. Remember, Venus is retrograding, questioning all of those desires. Is this the right one for me? Am I desiring the right thing? And Mercury will help Venus in that process as it's retrograding, checking out my questions, or my thoughts, rather, questioning the thoughts. And this is a time where you really have to be a little bit strict, actually quite a lot strict with yourself, so that you don't go down this place of like waiting for Santa Claus, waiting for that savior, waiting for that figure to make everything right. Because actually the intuition is just a guide. We still have to operate from the place of our rationality and our taking action. So that's the tough news. If you're not on board with that, and you also want to defend your or anybody else's victim consciousness, that's fine. But you won't be able to feel fully equipped to move into change. And every single one of us, without exception, has experiences of victimization. That's just part of being human. But what we do with that experience is the important thing. So if you want to stay with whatever victimization or whatever the story was, you can. There's always choice. But it's not going to bring an improved situation to your life. So this is where, if you don't like that message, there's loads of other places on YouTube that will blow sunshine up your wazoo and tell you all kinds of nice things, that the world is a difficult place, but you deserve so much better. The truth is, the world is a difficult place, and we are resilient. Humans are resilient, and we can move forward. And the only thing that makes it better is the thinking about it and how we manage our own capacity for choosing differently the next time, choosing our way forward. I want to just say here something I've said a few times in different videos throughout the last couple of years that I've been posting here. And that is coming from Nelson Mandela, who used to smoke. When he was imprisoned on Robben Island, he was a smoker. And he discovered that internally, he realized that the prison guards were using cigarettes as a way of manipulating him and other prisoners. So they would, just in a completely aleatory way, either withhold the cigarettes or give cigarettes. And that left them in a craving. It left them in a position of vulnerability. And he realized that the only way that he could step away from this control and being controlled by those guards and by the promise of cigarettes was to quit smoking. Therefore, they had nothing over him. So I want to put that out there, because that's a decision of someone who is willing to be greater than their circumstances. And we need to learn from people like that. We need to learn from people who overcome, who have shitty things happen to them, and yet they live, and yet they thrive. And there's so many examples. So find the example that speaks to you and build that resilience in the way that you can in your life. This is the moment. We need people who are resilient, not people who are falling apart at the seams. So this is a choice, and it's something that you can build even in the smallest way, taking steps towards something that feels more empowering and that feels like it's building an internal courage, an internal strength and resilience, remembering that you aren't your thoughts, you aren't your feelings, and you aren't the sum total of your memories. Those are things that have happened to you, and those are things that have built you and taken you to this place. Now what are you going to do about that going forward? We need this dynamic energy of letting go, the Piscean letting go, moving away from something into the next new thing. So this clearing out is a gift to us. This Venus and Mercury retrograding, these eclipses that are happening now just in this season alone, only in March. This is a unique moment in time where we're going between the March eclipse of the dynamic of Pisces Virgo, and then the dynamic of Pisces and Aries, and finding all that way to clear out the path, clear out the weeds and the prickly bushes, and make that path much clearer. Use that discernment, that Virgo discernment, with a feeling of hope. With that Aries, is where we find Mercury ruling this eclipse at this time. So with all that said, I'm going to propose now sign by sign. I'm going to really briefly touch on this, and very conveniently the universal, at least in universal time, the rising sign is Aries, so I don't even need to move the chart. So Aries, of course, this focus is very much on you at this time. But the eclipse itself is happening in your 6th house, what you feel obligated towards, or what are obstacles. And if you just listen to the introduction, this is really calling out to you, Aries. It's very, very much a part of your story at this time. And so that realization for you, whether it's back from September of 2023 or going forward, from this moment into September of 2026, there's a realization now of what needs to change in my everyday life, what needs to change in the way that I work or the way that I handle things. Is there a dynamic around being there for everybody but not myself? Or is there a dynamic around complaining? This is that dynamic of victim martyr, and it's very insidious. We don't see it happening. It's just there. It can be there, and sometimes our society, especially in Western society, especially in the Christian or Judeo-Christian tradition, complaining, moaning, all that stuff is it's almost like par for the course, because part of that story is that there's a savior that's going to rescue us from ourselves, and that the notion that there's a savior is what allows us to squander our life in complaining. Not a great plan, not a great way of living life. So definitely not something to encourage. And where you can experience change is going to be in that dynamic of your everyday life and how you want to move forward. This might have something to do with health, depending on your overall health. And it might have something to do with where you live or the quality of life that you have, because the moon represents your 4th house too. And that's where you've been experiencing your ruler, Mars, for quite a long time, since September 2024. So big story around your emotional framework. 4th house is also your emotional foundation, psychological foundation, your home and homeland and your connection to all of that. So lots and lots of change on the horizon for you between now and May. And of course, that will include all of your birthday cycle, Aries. So this is a part of how you're stepping into this new solar return cycle for Aries in a very important way. So make the most of this period of time for you, Aries, and I'll see you in the next video. And Taurus, this eclipse is happening in a trine to your sign. So the 5th house, which is a really lovely place to feel some realization around your connection, perhaps to what is love or what is creative, perhaps your actual children. The moon is the exaltation ruler for Taurus, and so it's always an interesting place for you to put your attention, not just Venus, which is your ruler, who's currently in the 12th house. So there's something here that you're understanding, perhaps based on a pattern that is unconscious to you, that is related to desires or things that you're you're only now awakening to, or it's things that are coming through relationships at a distance, or relationships that may not be something you can reveal at this stage. And this is part of where you might have to recognize where you're letting go of an attitude or a way of feeling around these different things. The fifth is your creative self-expression as well. And there's something here that is shedding, that is also part of a letting go phase. Where the South Node is moving through there, and more of your attention now moves to the sort of world stage, as it were, or your stage, the way that you are engaging out in society. And there's something that's changing there. So whether it be love relationships or friend relationships or relationships of some kind of emotional nature, it's going to have an impact on you it has been for the last year and a half, and it will have for another year and a half to come. And we will talk more about this as we go through the month of March. These energies are very strong. There's so many more things to say, so I will come back again and we'll refer to that, but reflect on these notions of how do I express myself and where do I put my emotions, and is that working for me? Is that constructive for me? And yeah, I wish you all the best at this time of the eclipse. And I will speak to you in and Uranus, of course, in your first house. I must mention that there's something in you that's changing, that you're realizing, and that emotional stuff is it's closer to your awareness. And this is an insight into yourself, whether that's what do I need, or whether that's how do I feel about things, or whether that is actually how am I acting in my everyday life. Come back to last summer, 2024, you'll get already a sense of what was going on then, because this is picking up on that. And all the more so if you are relating to the degree points that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. So good luck with that, Taurus. I'll see you in the next one. And Gemini, this is happening in your house of home and family, and where do I live, and how do I feel about all that, and what makes me feel secure, what makes me feel happy, and what do I need for all of those feelings of security and happiness. And with the South Node going through your fourth house, there's something changing that might quite literally be that you're moving, or that you're deciding that I need a different quality of life around my everyday home life. This can connect you to family, the family of origin, or your lineage, the people that you are relating to now in terms of your family. And there may be some tension around that, especially as Mars is in the second house of your values, but also relating to that family story. It's in a quadrant house. So you also have Jupiter in your first house, and you also have your ruler up in the 11th, telling you something about the future has to do with this, that there's a desire or a wish for the future to change and be different. And now there's something about your emotions and how you're relating to that is going to need to change. So again, listen to the introduction, because it will tell you something very important. You're growing into a whole new way of showing up in the world outside, in your social status, how you connect to people, perhaps even in your relationship, in your marriage. There's something that you are realizing about yourself, because Jupiter also rules your seventh house. So these are, again, the very important backbone of your chart, the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th. These are the quadrant houses that create a structure for your life, and they're being really strongly impacted here. That might be based on a change of relationship or a change of dynamic within the relationship, and how you might need to resolve that. So here we also have Uranus in the 12th house of what is unconscious, that is bringing insight into the story. It's bringing some new information into the story. Powerful change for you, powerful opportunities for realization, for unconscious patterns to emerge, or to recognize something about the way that you operate. 12th house is like the operating system behind the hardware, and your way of understanding things may have come to your attention more clearly now, and that gives you permission, especially as Jupiter is moving now forward through your first house, to grow and expand. So this is a lovely dynamic. So Mercury, your ruler, is also ruling your fourth house, and rules that moon in this total lunar eclipse. So there's something really important that you need to discuss, to communicate with, or to discuss and communicate outwardly or reflect on inwardly, that is part of this lunation cycle. So good luck with that, Gemini. I'll see you in the next one. Cancer, this is happening in your third house, and the third house is where we find our willpower, our aims and wishes for the moment. And it also includes our connection to the people around us, the local space, the community, or the neighborhood that you live in, quite literally. And there's something here that you're letting go. So it can also represent a desire to let go of an old, let's say, goal or a thing that I wanted to do before, and I'm not that interested in it anymore, or I need to change it for whatever reason. That might be an outer reason. Mars in your first house gives you a lot of dynamism at the moment. It's giving you a lot of energy for motivation and change, this dynamic for moving forward after a period of a couple of months of feeling quite sluggish and quite held back in some way or frustrated in some way. And Mars, of course, rules your 10th house. And this is, again, part of the quadrant house that I was just talking about for Gemini, the 1, 4, 7, and 10 axis is very important in the chart. It's creating something that we have to rely on, including for Cancer, ourselves. And because the moon is the ruler of Cancer, it's really significant when something happens around any lunation, but especially an eclipse time, because there's a part of you that reacts very strongly to this. And so whatever is going on here, and that third house, by the way, represents communication, teaching, because that axis between learning new skills, dynamics around skills, around information, sharing information, understanding. The third house is the joy of the moon, and that's because there's a lot of mental activity, and the moon reflects the mind. It is the reflection of consciousness, and sun is consciousness. The moon is the reflection of that. That means the mind. And here we have the sun and all the rest of this pile up in Pisces with the North Node in the house of your higher purpose and higher mind, and Venus and Mercury at the top of your chart. This has something to do with your sense of what you're doing out in the world. So that will come later in March, but it's a big part of a package deal. So listen to the introduction of this video to see what is it that I might need to change, and how do I need to relate perhaps to my own way of thinking, to my own emotionality, to my own dynamic of communication in order to achieve these goals. That's the third house. How do I use my willpower? And am I using it from a place of this higher concept of what I'm here for? Now we have also this trine coming from the moon to Uranus, as well as from the sun to Uranus, and even Saturn to Uranus. And that's in your 11th house of the future. So there's a lot of reflection on the future, as well as who you spend time with. The 11th house is the social sort of groups and things that are important to us. And a lot of this time should be reflected now, considering what is important to me. How do I work through my values? How do my values get reflected in the people that I spend time with? And that will impact also the way you choose locally, how you spend your time and what you put your attention on. So you, especially Cancer, are called to listen to that introduction where I talk about where you recognize what makes you feel anxious, what makes you feel unsettled or chaotic. And that tells you exactly where you need to put your attention at this time. And that will help you going forward as we then get into the new moon eclipse that's going to happen at this 9-degree point in your 10th house. And I'll do a whole separate video on that. So good luck with that, Cancer. It's a big time. And I'll see you in the next video. And Leo, this lunation is happening in your second house of possessions and money and what you value and what you think of as your value. And of course, your ruler, the sun, is in the 8th house now with Saturn and the North Node. So there's a lot of reflecting on what you share as values with other people. Do I get support from other people? How do I get support from other people? And in what way am I relating to that? Can I receive? Am I able to receive? And in what way do I need to shed either emotional baggage or ways of feeling around these things, or shed a pattern of perhaps even the dynamic around work that is about money? How do I deal with my money and my possessions? And we see also that Jupiter in your 11th house, which also represents gains, is something to keep in mind at this time, because that Jupiter is part of a bigger story of what is available to you, but it's going to come through you based on what you believe is possible. What do I deserve? I know that Leo has this whole reputation for being really all about me and I'm so special, but that notion of ego can also work in terms of a negative image that ego is about what we think of as a separate self. And a lot of Leos have a very negative self-image. They're extremely shy, extremely anxious of reaching out into the world. They really have low self-esteem. In fact, especially if you are a Leo rising, it's part of your journey now to build self-esteem and to realize who you are. You are the sun, the consciousness that just radiates like a child, just beaming and not holding yourself back. And so with the Virgo on the second house, your sense of value can also be kind of diminished because that Virgo is often preoccupied with the details and looking in the wrong direction and looking in the place that says, I may not be good enough, or I doubt my leonine quality, my sublime solar quality. And so this is a great opportunity for you to shed these senses of what doesn't support you. In this case, the mind may not be supporting you, your attitudes, your emotions may not be supporting you. What can you let go so that you can really shine and understand yourself from a much more unconscious place? You're going to have Mars coming into your sign at the middle of April, and that's going to give you an opportunity to really reach out into life. And we'll talk much more about all of these different things going on as we go through the next couple of weeks through March. Well, there's a lot to say, so I'm going to say it in different videos because I just can't pack it all in to one. But make the most of this time. Reflect on anything that's holding you back from your beautiful Leo quality. I'll see you in the next video. And Virgo, this is happening in your first house of self. And so there's a realization around yourself, and there's something that you now realize you can let go of to go to a better relationship quality, to go to a better place of the dynamic that you might have with others, and that you're shedding perhaps a feeling or an emotional nature around your bigger sense of who you are. This is a big time of a year and a half where you've got that south node moving through your first house. There's a lot of dynamics in your quadrant houses. That's the first, the fourth, the seventh, and the 10th. Those quadrant houses are the kind of backbone of the chart. It holds you in a frame of reference of self and how you feel about that, how you relate when based on that, and how you engage out in the world, that 10th house way. And we've got so many opportunities there now with Jupiter in the 10th house for Virgo. And this energy of the Virgoan perhaps overthinking things and doubting oneself and holding too much of yourself under the microscope. It really is time to change that. We see that also because you've got Pluto going through the 6th house, which has a resonance with that, with this quality of finding fault in things. So where can I let go of finding fault? Where can I find that things are actually okay? Things are working well. I'm moving in that direction of seeing what works as opposed to what doesn't work. And there is a time and a place to find the flaw in things. And of course, you've got Mars, Scorpio on the 3rd house, which is one of the reasons why Virgo has that intensity around communication, that intensity of being exact and precise and all the details, which is all the 3rd house stuff. But it's not always supporting you. It doesn't always work in your favor. So this is an opportunity for you to see, well, if I want to have a better quality of relationship in general, professional, individual, sexual, marital, whatever the important relationships, you need to recognize something of either a burden of an emotional expectation or a way of thinking and feeling about things that's not really constructive. How can you let that go? If this is an actual person that you're letting go of, then this is a time for also processing that and recognizing it's a time for pioneering new things. It's about making peace with what we have to release right now and moving into something new, and trust that the greater karma of this moment is to let go of certain people, certain relationships, and especially certain ways of relating. Okay, I'll come back and share a lot more in other videos in the next couple of weeks. So good luck, Virgo. See you then. And Libra, this is happening in your 12th house. So that's a place where there's a lot of unconscious activity, and it can be the thing that motivates you, but without necessarily becoming aware of that. Now it's an opportunity to be more aware. The moon is where the sun is reflecting the light and showing us something that we need to understand. Let's say we need to grapple with this awareness that's a 12th house thing. Now, that might have something to do with your unconscious or motivations around understanding patterns that are self-destructive, including addictive behavior. It's the house of self-undoing. So some of the behaviors that we undergo that are not really helpful. And in your case, because we're looking also at the moon, we're looking at that ruling the 10th house. So is that with reference to your social standing, your reputation, or even a career or a job or a relationship with people that you work for or work with? That's part of this dynamic that you can really look at. Of course, your ruler Venus is retrograde at this time, and she's in the house of relationship. And she's there with Mercury, which is going back and forth now between your 6th house of work and the 7th house of relationship. So a big part of this dynamic has to do with your way of relating in the everyday. Who do you relate to? Who should you relate to? Are you relating in a way that's supportive and healthy for you? And is that working for you in terms of your health, your mental health, your physical health? The moon is reflecting health issues and where that might be issues around mental health, things that might require some support, or that you might simply just need to question the way that you're thinking, the patterns that might be disrupting you, including escapist patterns, because 12th house is also the house of running away from reality, not being able to handle reality. And that's where we get addictions. That's literally what they come from. It's a need to distract from reality. So check in all these different areas and how that might be impacting you right now. And we'll come back and we'll have a look again at different ways that this month of March is affecting us. And your ruler, Venus, is playing a really huge role in this pattern. She has set off this eclipse cycle on the 1st of March by retrograding already in your 7th house at that 9-degree point, which is going to come back again and again and again. So really interesting times for you, Virgo, time for potential really overcoming something. South Node eclipse is about letting go. So letting go of emotional burdens or patterns or depression or any kind of pattern of behavior that's not supporting you, and to really work to sustaining that. Your exaltation ruler is Saturn in the 6th house, gives you a lot of stability. We want to have those more challenging planets in the 6th because it gives you courage, it gives you this resilience to move through your everyday. So this is a great opportunity to look at all of those things. Good luck with that, Libra, and I'll see you in the next video. Right, I'm going to actually move backwards now to get to Scorpio because we've lost our lunation. So I just want to keep it in Virgo. So we're going to back up to Scorpio and start the cycle again. Scorpio. So although it's not on the 14th, we're actually still within the dynamic of this lunar eclipse, which is at 24 degrees, not at this degree. I just had to do that to put Scorpio on the 1st house. So Scorpio, we still have your ruler up in the 9th house. So a lot of your dynamic at this time is thinking about your sense of purpose. Why am I here? What am I doing with my life? So that's a big part of the theme right now for you overall. Mars also rules your everyday house of work and how you show up every day, what that dynamic is. And that's where we have Venus, and then very soon Mercury retrograding. So Venus retrograded there at the 1050 degree mark on the 1st of March, and then we'll have on the 15th of March, just hours within a day after the eclipse, we're going to have Mercury retrograding in your 6th house, which your ruler governs. And so there's something about your sense of higher purpose that is part of this bigger shift. And that brings us then to the future, which is where we find this lunation, because that is in the place of hopes and dreams for the future. Go back to September, 15th of September, 2023. Was there something that you wanted to develop, whether it be a vision for your future or a sense of who you're connecting with socially or spiritually, or whatever group speaks to you? How did you engage in that social dynamic or the dynamic of where you reach out into your sort of future visioning or the hopes and dreams that you have for a future? And now there's something has to change, especially since January when the South Node moved in there. With the moon there, you're realizing, okay, this isn't working, that's not working, this I'm going to let go, this I have to move away from. And there may be a certain amount of healing or grieving around that. It might be social connections that you're having to let go of. And it's coming from a place of where you understand now, where the Sun, Saturn, and the North Node especially are pulling a lot of attention at the moment, pulling a lot of attention into how you express yourself, how you reach out into joy and happiness, how you create going forward in your life. And it might have something to do with children or love relationships and that dynamic around those things and what's important to you now in that sense. And part of that dynamic is how that shows up in your everyday. This is an opportunity to realize things, to become aware of things. The moon also rules that Mars at the moment. So as the moon rules your ninth house, there's a potential for you to have this perhaps over idealized vision for the future, or over idealistic way of thinking. I need to always be happy. I should always be, things should be better than they are. So look out for that feeling of disgruntlement, this feeling of things aren't the way they should be, and try and understand the woulda, coulda, shoulda that has governed you perhaps in the past, and is that still working for you now, and what needs to change. Listen to the introduction to hear more about that, and I will definitely be coming back with some ideas coming in future videos. And one last thing is that the Uranus is actually trining the lunation as well as the nodal axis, the Sun and Saturn. It's sextiling the nodal axis from the North Node, Sun and Saturn, and it's trining from the Moon and the South Node from your house of relationship. So this also will for sure include notions of relationships and bonded pairs and professional connections and so on, partnerships of all kinds. So a lot to reflect on here in terms of where do I realize my future is going, and is that the direction I want? So listen to the introduction because it's got a lot to help you understand that. All right, good luck, Scorpio. Sagittarius, this is happening. This lunar eclipse is happening in your 10th house of your career or your social status and your reputation and your sense of maybe a vocation. It may be just what it is that you really are passionate about, what you really want to do, and how you show up there. And there's a realization here. It's showing you something based on what you realize now you need to feel happy and secure. And this is part of the dynamic of Saturn over the last couple of years, as well as the North Node now since January. The Sun is reflecting from that place of your feeling grounded, or even your psychological state. We've had Mars going through your 8th house now for quite some time. That will have been stirring up a lot of psychological stuff, perhaps also around crisis, around big change, big events changing, perhaps even loss in terms of loved ones, or loss of support financially, potentially as well, depending on your circumstances. And a lot of this dynamic is really asking you to become more aware of how all of this underpinning, whatever underpins your life, is actually affecting how you reach out into your socializing or into your status and the things that you want to accomplish, your ambitions and drives in this day-to-day world. And overall, and that's going to change. It's already started the process of change in January. It's a big time change now in March as the South Node continues to move through that 10th house for you. Part of this learning is to go with that retrograde cycle, and I'll come back and talk even more about that. I've already spoken about that in other videos, especially the Venus retrograde video, where that retrograde cycle is in your 5th house of how you express yourself and also how you engage in romance. Now, Mars rules this 5th house, which is why Sagittarius gets this reputation for jumping into relationship potentially before having checked out all the bells and whistles. And look for those red flags in this retrograde period. If you're engaging in a relationship, your ruler is in the 7th house, which is Gemini. It's ruled by the Mercury that is about to retrograde. So you are likely to be questioning relationships at this time. Trust that it's for the better. Trust that your future self, or the vision that you have for your social status and so on, will thank you for reflecting over the next couple of months. Will thank you for doing a deep cleanse of historic emotional baggage, or the way that you feel about things and how your emotions might have you jumping into things in a way that could be leaping before you look again, this will apply to some of you, and some of you will be much more about a creative project. And it's the same thing. If this is a creative project, this might need some revision, for example, or it might require a new way of reflecting back in relationships to get you to this place where it ends up being seen, let's say, out in the career. But whatever it is, the creative process is changing. So roll with that. Recognize that the process itself is changing, or the way that you want it to be reflected is going to change. Venus represents your social circles, or the stage that you operate on, depending on how you work with that creative energy. And of course, relationships of all kinds of social networks and groups that you belong to. And it also represents your future. So this is also connecting you to your future in some way. Big story there for Sagittarius. After a couple of rocky years, you're still working through a process of understanding yourself. So use this retrograde cycle, go right through to the end of April and into May before you really hitch your wagon to a star at this point, Sagittarius. Just try to slow down, hold your horses, dear Sag, and I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn, this is happening in your 9th house of your sense of your purpose. Why am I here? What is life all about? And what does it all mean? And especially connecting potentially to a father or father figure, guide, mentor, teacher. The moon up there with a south node is saying that there's some aspect of this relationship that is understood, or you have integrated, or you're trying to work through that integration and you're moving away from that now. It's got to be let go of at this particular phase, or at least the things that are not functioning need to be released. And that can come with opinions, because the 9th house is also dogma. It's ideology. It's like, this is the right way, this is the only way, and become aware of where that thinking might be holding you back. This is a trine to your sign, so it's very constructive, very helpful. And you also have trining your sign, you also have Uranus, which is changing your sense of what is joyful, what is happy, what is an expressive, fun way of living life. And perhaps also relating to children. So this dynamic potentially through father relationship, my role as a father, if you are indeed one, all of it changing, and letting go in a way that feels like it's more in alignment with what you believe now, what you have faith in, what is important in your philosophy or your spiritual way of relating. We have Mars in your 7th house. Relationships have been a bit of an issue over the last few months, no doubt. And Mars is also the ruler of your 4th house. So that really implies that your most intimate relationships, including potentially the relationship to your own psyche and your own emotional self, Capricorn can fly off the handle, because Mars rules that 4th house of the psychology and emotions, and can make a Capricorn a little reactive. So that's something that would be seen in an individual chart. But in this case, there would be something within relationship that can really cause you to struggle or lash out, or have challenges coming from the relationship, the dynamic there. So really question my sense of my beliefs, my priorities, my vision for my, why I'm here. And is this a battle I'm willing to have? Will I die on this hill? And that's something to reflect on, because a bigger part of your energy now is to be taken into the way that you communicate, how you connect with people, how you make choices, and the things that you are grappling with in terms of your aims and how you use your will, how you develop courage. Your ruler is here in that 3rd house. So this is a big point of transformation over the last couple of years, and it continues to be right through February of 2026. This dynamic for you is also including the retrogrades from your 4th house, which will involve home and how you connect to family, how you connect to your lineage in general, including your home and homeland, your country, your people, whatever. And that can also be part of the bigger story. And that Venus, Mercury, both of them retrograding around the time of this eclipse is a really big part of the overall growth that you're expected to grapple with, let's say, between now and May, at least cosmically, nobody else has expectations, but the cosmos is offering you this opportunity to grapple with how you communicate, how you think about things, and how that is rooted in what you need to feel emotionally and psychologically secure, and potentially also materially secure as well. Mars represents property, and that's fourth house as well. So property and land and so on is also fourth house, and Mars is also how we engage with that. So real estate might play a role in all of this stuff too. So as this is a big retrograde phase, it's a time to reflect on these things, not necessarily a good time to act on them. But you will know better, Capricorn. You're a Capricorn after all. So good luck with all of that. I'll see you in the next video. And Aquarius, this is happening in your 8th house. So there's a lot of stuff happening in terms of what might feel like a revelation in terms of your psychology, or around what might be inherited patterns, emotional patterns that are inherited, that can be challenging, that can be around issues of psychological or emotional nature that runs in the family, patterns that run in the family, or it can be something to do with an inheritance or something that you're receiving, whether it be financial or otherwise. It can be something that you're recognizing is no longer available to you, the support that you thought was there for you. Now you realize you've got to go it more alone. That is part of the North Node here in the 2nd, as well as Saturn in the 2nd. Working more for yourself based on your values, on what you're bringing to the table, what your resources are. And this moon is showing you there's something that you may have been relying on that you recognize now you can't any longer rely on it, or that you are not, it's not gainful, let's say, for you to continue to work from this pattern, or work from this emotion, or work from this psychological space. The moon rules your 6th house of health. If that has something to do with health, we've got Mars there in the 6th house, which can also sometimes signify, especially as it's not in great dignity, Mars gives you a lot of courage to work through health issues, but it can also be inflammation, but also inflamed emotions, because it also rules your 3rd house, and it's not in a great dignity in Cancer in the 6th house, and the moon is ruling the 6th from the 8th house. So if there's a lot of emotionality at this time, or if there's a lot of psychological struggle, please listen again to, or listen full stop to the initial sort of half-hour introduction of this video, because it holds a lot of information around that. And so your ruler Saturn is in your 2nd house at the time of this lunar eclipse. It's playing a huge role. It does all the way through March play a very big role in the changes that are happening, and especially as in April, Saturn is also at the degree point where both Venus and Mercury come back to retrograde. To station direct in the course of their cycle, of their retrograde cycle. So Saturn is playing a huge role. That's kind of like saying you are as well. It's like there's a big part of you that needs to get a grip on your values and your finances and your maybe family as well. What is going on in family issues and the family dynamics, and what is supporting you overall. Everything in the 2nd house supports you, or otherwise. And so this is where you want to grapple with a lot of that stuff. And so in this case, it can be your family trauma, or family secrets, or other issues that are challenging. It's a house of crisis as well, new surprising things coming up that is not supporting you necessarily, and now you need to let that go, or it comes to your attention to allow you to let that go as well. So good luck with all of this, Aquarius. I'll see you in the next video. And Pisces, this is happening in your 7th house, where the lunar eclipse is going to show you something about your way of relating to people, or the people themselves that you're relating to, and recognizing what you need to let go of. There can be simply a pattern of relating that's emotional, in the way that you love, or the way that you demonstrate love, or the way that you feel about things. And the 5th house is ruled by the moon, and that's where you have your, let's say, your way of expressing yourself. So that's why Pisces is seen to be quite an emotional sign. We've got Cancer on the 5th house. That's what that means. And so there's this dynamic here where you're recognizing, this is happening in relationships. And this can be anything from, I'm not so keen on this person anymore, or we need more work. We need to put in more effort to relate better, because also we've got Venus ruling your 8th house of intimacy, and she's in the 2nd house of your values, and that's where she's retrograding. So it's a big part of this dynamic that has a lot to do with this bigger story of what is important to me, what are my values. Venus is your exaltation ruler. We also have Jupiter, your ruler, in the 4th house of your what the sort of place of what you need to be secure emotionally, psychologically, materially, what it feels like to be grounded, having an expanded sense of self in terms of that stability. And Jupiter is in a dual sign, Gemini, so that may not be very stable. That also is another way of showing that foundation of the way that Pisces are can also be emotionally or psychologically thrown off balance easily because of that Gemini. And here we have Mercury in the 2nd house, which is retrograding. So it's implying basically that there is an opportunity for you to really see what throws me off balance. Is it an individual? Is it a person or type of relationship that throws me off? Is this something I need to pull away from? Or is this something I'm realizing I really need more of in my life, and therefore I'm going to invest more in? So it doesn't always have to be that the relationship has to end, but there's something about relationships that have to end. We're talking about a South Node lunar eclipse. It's letting go of the lunar stuff. That can also be a creative project, for example, because the moon also rules that 5th house. It can also be, for example, that you're a parent and this is about the empty nest relationship that you might be having with your child, for example. Or if you're talking about, with your partner, or you're having wanting a pregnancy, or you're dealing through whatever pregnancy, there's something about that maternal or the family story that is needing to be let go of. The version that you might have thought is no longer possible or no longer what you want. And that's also where we find Mars going through there in the 5th and challenging the relationship around the idea of creative projects or having children or the things that you create, full stop. And it's the questioning around the values is part of this. Is something that has been holding you back now. And how you move forward from this is really going to be a reflection of how you feel about the people that you're hanging out with, or the way that you relate to others in general. And that can be that's the house of the self and other, and that can include what you might describe as opponents as well. And so maybe you're realizing that there's a battle that you're no longer willing to fight, and you can give that up at this time as well, with great effect, because it's going to free you up for something better, as the eclipse cycle really does show you are blossoming into something else, with both the impact of the North Node as well as the sun in your sign at this time. Alrighty, I'll come back and we'll talk about more of these things in a future video, and I will look forward to that. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It's always lovely to read your comments. I do appreciate them very much. And of course, like the usual stuff. And thank you for your support. See you in the next video.